Thank you. My name is Susan McFarlane-Alvarez, and thank you for inviting me. I want to apologize to all the people who are in standing room only areas. Hopefully a couple of seats will open up. So I'm going to share with you some details about human billboarding. And I thought I'd start with a little bit of a story about two students. And the two students that I'm speaking to you about were on campus. They were seniors about to graduate, not unlike students maybe in our graduating class this year with similar concerns about completing classes. But one major concern that defined these students and relate them to my talk is the fact that they were saddled with a lot of debt. And they were worried about it because this was in 2011. And they were about to graduate into a very hostile job market. So they were wondering how they were going to pay off their debts. Their names were Ed Moyes and Ross Harper, and they were students at Cambridge University. Between them, they had £50,000 sterling in debt to pay off. They didn't have jobs lined up or anything, and so they were starting with that much debt to pay off. That's the equivalent of about 75,000 US dollars using today's conversion rates. So they came up with this brilliant idea that they thought could help them to at least partially solve some of their problem in terms of paying off their debt. And they came up with this company, and they named it Buy My Face, as in buy my face. And through this company, what they did is they solicited sponsors, so to speak, who would be interested in placing their logos on their faces, and therefore getting a certain amount of recognition and awareness from audiences that the advertisers were trying to reach. And it worked. The two students, Ed and Ross, were able to completely pay off their debt by doing this. Their model grew in popularity, and so they got major companies like Ernst & Young, multinational corporations, who were interested. And it continues to build today. So this is 5 years later. So a lot of people thought that this would just be a sort of flash in the pan, but you can still find them on Facebook if you type in Buy My Face, and you can see what sort of things they're up to these days. So this topic also relates to something that you've probably seen from year to year and around your neighborhoods and maybe just around the corner from this campus, and that is dancing statues. Who are they? The Liberty dudes and gals, right? So if your neighborhood is like mine, then you might see somebody that looks like this, and you suddenly remember, yay, I've completed my taxes, or oh my gosh, I just have a month left to put everything together. So these are examples of what I'm speaking about today as well. And then there are other familiar faces that may come to mind for you in terms of examples of this phenomenon of peopled publicity, as I'm calling it. We've got the Chick-fil-A cow on the left, and then on the right, this is a shot from something that was called the Mascot Walk of Fame. You may have seen this trending. I think it was about a year ago. They had a huge celebration of it, and it's become an annual event where mascots from lots of different companies get together and just have a good time, basically celebrating the brands that they represent. So in today's talk, I will share with you a little bit of how I came to this topic, give you a couple of examples of recent cases of human billboards, give you a history of human billboarding in terms of it not being such a recent phenomenon, or not only being a recent phenomenon, and then talk a little bit about the industrial and cultural implications. So I've kind of lived in the world of advertising in two ways, and that is professionally. I've worked in advertising between my master's and my doctoral work, and then also through my teaching and research. And I'm constantly battling with a critique of the advertising industry and fear of everything that happens in advertising, as a lot of scholars in the area are fearful. And then teaching students the sort of how to do it effectively and use the strategies of persuasion to get people to empty their wallets into the coffers of corporations. And so my first awareness of this being a problem or a phenomenon came about through reading Naomi Klein's No Logo, a seminal work. And she talks about us, human beings, as walking, talking, life-size Tommy Hilfiger, she's referring to dolls, in the sense that everything we do is branded. So whether we're putting on a shirt with a logo on it, or whether we are holding a Camelback water bottle, we're branded, our lives are branded, and that has certain implications in terms of what it does to us as individuals and what it does to us collectively as well. So I remembered that reference, and as I started to become more and more aware of the phenomenon that was happening surrounding human billboarding, I also realized that a lot of the scholars who look at advertising from the perspective of it tending to occupy everything and everywhere that we are extremely critical, right? So they use terms like it's the end of all human civilization because ads are creeping into every space and into our consciousness, and we can't get away from it even no matter how hard we try. Sut Jali is an extremely influential thinker in this area, and so he uses terms like the fact that advertising is taking us in a direction of towards a point of no return, where it's actually going to usurp and replace human culture, our collective culture, and that we're just going to become all about this corporatized culture in all the spaces in which we exist. So he's talking about it as sort of pollution, right? He sees all of advertising as pollution. It interrupts the things that we really want to watch, like Doctor Who. And it pops up on our screens when we don't want it, and so we have to install things to get rid of it. He sees it as corruptive and as a pollutant. When I first started this, I was kind of veering in that direction because a lot of my own reading is sort of based on that sort of critical approach. But then I started thinking about a more productive position and the fact that advertising culture is an important part of our material culture and our human reality and understanding, to the extent that when I talk to my students about things like product placement, it's just a given. They think of product placement in films as giving it a sense of reality. So it's quite natural that somebody would pick up a branded iPhone, and actually when the brand is blocked out, that's when it seems unreal, right? So it's a part of human reality, and we can look at it as a significant artifact of human culture in its own right. So I start from the standpoint of recognizing human billboards as part of that advertising world that is worthy of serious historical and critical analysis. So on that note, I turn to the history of it. It has been around for centuries. So the Buy My Face dudes seem like a very novel approach to getting a message out and exchange of monies for prominence and awareness. But this has actually been going on for centuries. And so it's often used in response to historically recurring problems of authorities trying to exclude ads from spaces. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And then today we can see differences between how they were configured originally when they first started coming into being and what they are today. And that is through an increase in what I'm calling agency, with a play on words intended. So I had a look at the work of Frank Presbury, and he has a book called The History and Development of Advertising. And in that book, he talks about, the book came out in 1929. These are some image pulls from his book. And he talks about human billboarding as being present even as early as ancient Greece. And so the crier would have been used for public announcements and later for private interests. And we've all probably heard about these sorts of things in like intro media classes about sharing of public announcements through people who were crying through the towns. Later in 3rd century Britain, Presbury also talks about this, and he talks about merchants hiring people who would walk through the streets to speak about or to bark and advertise their goods. And then in 19th century London, there were actual sandwich boards coming into being as early as that. And so you would have people walking with a board in the front, as in the image on the right, and a board in the back, and hence the word sandwich boards came into being with the person sandwiched between them. And so through a preliminary survey of human billboards, I started to get an understanding of the phenomenon and a sense of the definition of the term or what the umbrella term encompasses it. And it really is quite broad. And so we're talking about advertising messages that in lots of different ways transcend the boundary between the human form and the advertisement. And so if we have a look at that, we can get a sense of all sorts of things that could fall under that category. So from branded clothing, right? So this is what Naomi Klein was talking about, us just wearing a hat that has the Nike swoosh on it, or putting on a polo shirt that has a brand on it, right? And that is a factor of the maker of the clothing just wanting to let people that you see know that you're wearing something that they've manufactured. On a more sort of organized basis, we can also talk about team apparel, right? So whether you're part of a corporate team and wear a branded piece of clothing, or arguably even our name tags could fall into this category, right, with the Clayton State University logo on it. Or perhaps you're part of you're an employee of a team and you wear a logo on your short shirt to represent the fact that you are an usher at a Falcons game, for example. Then we get further along the line towards organization, and you have actual brand ambassadors. So here you'll have a company like Nike entering into a sponsorship arrangement with a celebrity who represents certain ideals or values or strengths or prowess in a certain athletic arena, and they want to associate their brand very closely with that person in the hope that some of the attributes of that person individually are going to rub off on the brand. Of course, we know what happens with those sorts of sponsorships when things go awry, or awry, when things go awry with the person who is associated with the brand, then there's the question of, okay, do we disassociate from this person because of infidelity or because of drug use, right? And that's where we get a sense of the closeness or the proximity between how the brand signifies in relation to the individual that's wearing it. There's also, again, under the umbrella of this broad category of human billboards, mannequins in store windows, right? So if you think of live mannequins, not just the plastic form, but the actual human live mannequins that you might see in Manhattan, where people are actually standing up and wearing the clothing that is being sold inside the store. So it's acting as an ad, but you have human forms in that advertising space. So I came up with this continuum. So I started dropping these different examples of human billboards into this continuum. And so over on the left, if we're looking at these individual examples, we've got, starting from the left, we've got 4 categories that are 1, 2, 3, 4, what I'm calling ads on humans, right? And so I started dividing these into 2 categories, ads on the human being versus humans in living ads, right, which are the 3 on the right. So the ads on human beings on the left, it's just average people randomly wearing or selectively wearing branded clothes. And then we move into ads on humans being more closely associated with people who have been hired by or paid by an organization to wear a brand, to identify them as part of that organization. And then we have the brand ambassadors, as I spoke about, Tiger Woods. And then we move into ads on humans, where we actually have the removal of the item of clothing or the badge and the placement, as in the guys from By My Face, the placement of the logo, the brand, the corporate identifier actually on the skin of the person. So the branding, right? Branding of the person with a brand in that very literal sense. Then when we get into humans in live ads, I started looking at mediated representations, right? Mediated advertisements, and the fact that, yes, human beings do appear in there, and you can have the connection between a person as representative of a brand. And that Old Spice campaign, are you familiar with that Old Spice campaign of I'm on a horse? You have this person in the ad whose name I think is Isaiah Mustafa, and he becomes an embodiment of the brand of Old Spice, right? He's this manly man, and he's the man that all women want their men to be like, supposedly. And And so he becomes a representation of the brand Allspice. And in more recent editions of this, you have Terry Crews being added, and he becomes a representation in the ad of a different, I think, brand extension of Old Spice. So you have humans in ads representing brands. And then moving along, we've got the live mannequins becoming a bit more performative in terms of ad intersecting with human identity. And then ultimately, we've got the live performance of an advertisement in a public space. And so I came up with that continuum to sort of help me to organize and hopefully help others in the process what it means, this category of human billboards, and also to recognize the diversity of things that that definition encompasses. So looking at a couple of these examples that I slotted into that continuum also helps to give us a sense of what is involved in each of these examples and where historically they occurred. So this example is Windows Vista. Do you remember that terrible launch? Everything went wrong with Vista, didn't it? Microsoft launched Windows, and this living billboard was constructed in Manhattan's West Side. It was kind of a Cirque du Soleil style performance, and you had these different colored, costumed performers in spandex bodysuits, sort of dropping down, rappelling down the side of a building against this backdrop of a banner. And it was just a spectacle. It was just a visual spectacle. The acrobats were coordinated and appeared to interact with the window spaces. And so it was supposed to get people's attention, draw an attraction to and some kind of association with Windows Vista at the time of its launch. This next example is from 2010, from Ing Direct. And this is actually a man mounted on the side of a bus driving through a city street. And this was done by Leo Burnett Advertising in Milan. And so there are other examples of this, but I thought that this was particularly interesting, sort of the kind of risks that human billboards take. You get a sense of that in the other one, but this one is extremely risky. But also in this Indirect campaign, there was another one where you had a big orange billboard, static orange billboard, and then you had benches and people just sort of sitting on the benches. And the nice feature about this one was that you could actually go up to the people in the billboard and ask them questions about Ing Direct, right? And what Ing was trying to convey through this campaign was that Ing was about interpersonal connection. So whereas the whole world was going towards robotic calls and automated systems, you could actually get a person when you connected with ING. Okay. This one is for Calvin Klein. And again, a lot of these things seem to happen in New York. This one, it was a representation of the bottle, the actual product bottle. And you had rooms in the bottle. And then you had models just sort of living out their day in the room. And I guess this would attract the voyeur in a lot of people passing by, just sort of wanting to see what the models would be doing throughout the day. And the bottle said, the tagline for this advertising campaign was, "You're the one." And the idea was that this visual spectacle sort of spoke to the brand attributes, meaning Calvin Klein had developed this product, and by putting on the product, you would feel extremely special. You'd feel like you were the one. So step inside the room vicariously through one of these models, and you could get to feel like you were one of these special people under the spotlight. So speaking about the category of ads on humans, some of the other terms that are used for this category are body-tizing, right? So the combined terms of the body and advertising, and tat ads, because a lot of them take place obviously through tattooing. Usually temporary tattoos, but people actually do get permanently tattooed for the purpose of human billboarding. So there are two cases that are notable. This first one was for Toyota, and Toyota paid some college students to walk through, can you guess, Times Square, with the logo temporarily tattooed on their foreheads, just to build awareness and interest about the brand. The other one is SnoreStop. And this was a guy called Andrew Fisher. He was 20 years old, and he actually used eBay to auction off the use of his forehead. So you would go onto eBay and you'd see an ad for buy a space on my forehead to place your ad and get recognition for your product or brand. So SnoreStop, the advertiser, paid $40,000 to place their logo on Andrew's head. It was a temporary tattoo, and it attracted attention in terms of people that he would meet on an interpersonal level. But then people also started taking note of this because it was newsworthy, it was strange. And so in addition to the interpersonal interest, he started appearing on news media and getting more publicity for the brand and for himself. He's a graphic designer, through media coverage of the fact that he had the brand on his face as well. I don't know if you've ever heard of an entity called goldenpalace.com. I think they're a sort of casino entertainment brand. And they always do really wacky promotional events. And so they paid £3,000 sterling. And this time it was a permanent tattoo. This person's name is Nick Long. And it, again, resulted from an eBay auction. So these eBay auctions are quite common. And you'll see, I have a slide coming up, I think, of a screenshot of an eBay auction based around human billboarding. But what you'll see is an individual saying, you know, I've got this really nicely sculpted bicep. I'm a construction worker. I wear sleeveless shirts all day. I'm in a busy location in downtown Atlanta. Approximately 4,000 people per day will see my bicep. And you can even see people calculating like the cost per impact, the way advertisers are interested in determining, you know, it costs me $5 to reach 500 people. And that sort of equation is being made in cases of human billboarding. So from that continuum I showed you, you can see varying relationships between individual identities and brand values. And you can also get a sense of the stature of celebrity and the luxury appeal of a brand, for example, in the case of Rolex and Tiger Woods. So it varies in terms of, in semiotic terms, there's a variance between the direct relationship between the brand and the thing that is wearing it, or the person that is wearing it, I should say. In the case of SnoreStop, there's not really a direct relationship between stopping snoring and the person, Andrew Fisher. It's just sort of a floating signifier, right? The brand is just being placed on a person's head to get attention. But in the case of Tiger Woods, there's a sense of, here's a quality, perhaps in inverted commas these days, person that we as a luxury brand want to associate with. So here's that example that I mentioned before of an ad on eBay and how a seller can sell their body as advertising space through a medium of eBay. And these transactions actually take place, and some of them are actually quite successful. And so here's the difference that I refer to in the abstract of my paper, and that I go into more detail in the paper, is the fact that these two categories with their subcategories offer us a way to look at advertising in terms of the role of organizations like advertising agencies. So in Ads on Humans, I'll actually start on the right. It's a lot less complicated. I can just myself put an ad on eBay, get somebody who's interested, and then organize for a tattoo to be placed on my skin. So two students with minimal setup were able to master this model and pay off huge sums of debt, whereas Humans in Living Ads requires a little bit more of setup. So you have to have, usually you'll have to have an advertising agency of professionals who can negotiate use of the space, actually produce the banner through printing, hire some talent who can rappel down a building. So it takes a lot more work. And it's usually larger organizations that will do the humans in living ads. And then there's a historical difference as well. Ads on humans actually became more performative later on in their existence. At first they were town criers and barkers, then the placard-carrying standard bearers. This reminds me, I spent part of my childhood in Trinidad, and this reminds me a lot of early masquerade bands. And so it started taking on that performative component as it started developing, and as advertisers were looking for ways to get impact, right? So that's really what's behind the human billboard. And so one person with a placard may have a bit of impact, but then you start having Jack's Bakery down the street doing it as well. Now we need more impact, so we need a whole band of masqueraders and a horse and cart to attract attention. So you had costumed workers. This is an example, again, from the Presby book of people dressed up as, I think it's shoe polish canisters. And so you have the donning of things that actually look like the brand as well. There's a connection to P.T. Barnum. Perhaps not surprisingly, we know about his history of spinning a story to attract people to come to shows. And so his idea of showmanship is also at the heart of human billboarding. When we look at human billboarding and the progression of the sign-carrying barkers, there's also a sense of performativeness. And in the paper I look at things like our desire for proximity. So there's this great video that I captured, and it's of a human in live ads billboard, and there are people on their phones capturing what's happening because there's an aura associated with the billboard. And I think that's what advertisers are sort of tapping into with human billboards. And of course I had to make mention of Doctor Who down here. So we don't just want to watch Doctor Who, we also want to wear a shirt and wear the scarf and have things in our offices as well. So we want to be ever more close to the things that we associate with in terms of brands. So yeah, human billboards have a sense of aura because they are living and because they're defined by liveness. On television, I started thinking about the differences between, that Isaiah Mustafa presence in the Old Spice ad, and there's a certain magicness that goes along with television advertising anyway. So if you think about that ad with Mustafa, he's magically in a shower, and then the shower turns into him on a boat. And magically at the end, he's holding a product, and then it turns into diamonds and tickets, and then he's magically on a horse. And that's the last line of the commercial, "I'm on a horse." And that sense of magic is further heightened because now we have the liveness, right? And that liveness is what really makes it impactful, because there's no way to cut and edit something that is live, which I'm sure is what's going to happen to this presentation, so that it becomes seamless and wonderful. So then I asked why then and why now. So it's a great way for advertisers to break through the clutter, and that is a persistent problem, whether it is that you're confined to spaces, you can't put up billboards here, or there are too many billboards there. And so this is a great way for advertisers to break through clutter, whether it is then and now. It's also a great way, as we've seen in a lot of these cases, to upturn some of the hierarchies of advertising norms, and so this can happen without a big agency, some forms of this. It's also outlandish, right? When you think of the social position of human billboarding, Dickens actually refers to the sandwich boards as a piece of human flesh between two slices of pasteboard. And so he's not even recognizing the person that's holding the pasteboards as human. He's sort of referring to them as base, just a piece of meat that you could pick up at a market, and that therefore has no sense of value. So because it is carnivalesque, the human billboard exists sort of on the periphery. When you think about it, or if you see a Statue of Liberty dancing on a corner, you just in interviewing people about how they think about those people, it came across that there's a sense of like almost pity that those people have to be putting on a Statue of Liberty costume in order to make a living, and that's how the organization attracts people. Fast forwarding to today, the human billboard takes lots of different forms, and so you have something called a telepack. It was originated by 2 Australian entrepreneurs, and these are great for selling sort of direct point of sale selling. So if you're in a bar and somebody comes walking through with an ad of a beer that's available at the bar, then maybe it makes you want to buy something that is available in that actual point of sale. And then lastly, by way of moving towards conclusion, agency in this sense is related to the advertising agency's historical role as constructing an ad and then placing an ad in the media. But agency in the sense of human billboarding takes on a slightly different configuration in the sense that as individuals, it gives us power, whether we're entrepreneurs or college students, to sort of navigate the world of advertising on our own. It compacts the different stages of advertising and the different talents it takes to do advertising into something that can be digitally accomplished and then very hyper-specifically performed, right? So again, Andrew Fisher can go on eBay, place an ad for his space, get an advertiser to buy that space, and then print a temporary tattoo and apply it himself. So a lot of people have sort of referred to things like Buy My Face as a flash in the pan. It's still around, and again, looking at the broader picture of human billboarding and its history, it's obvious that it's been around for centuries and it's likely to continue to evolve as corporations looking for ways to break through the clutter. Thank you for your time and attention.